Chapter 4: The Language of Spiritual Healing. Not long ago I talked with an Orthodox minister who had just finished reading my book, Practicing the Presence. He had enjoyed it very much, found it challenging, but he added that the language and some of the terms used were new to him. Certainly, it is true that to the reader untutored in mysticism, some terms are incomprehensible, but it must be remembered that mysticism, just like every other field of study, has its own specialized terminology. Spiritual healing as taught in the Infinite Way is built around few words. Before we go on to consider these words, let me explain briefly what the Infinite Way is. It is a spiritual teaching consisting of principles which anyone may follow and practice, irrespective of his religious affiliation. The Infinite Way reveals the nature of God to be one infinite power, intelligence, and love. The nature of individual being to be one with his qualities and character, expressed in infinite forms and variety, and the nature of the discords of this world to be a misconception of God's expression of himself in his universe. These are universal principles based on the message of the Master, Christ Jesus, who taught that man can realize his oneness with God through conscious communion with God, thereby bringing about peace on earth, harmony, and wholeness. In this new language of spiritual healing, the first and most important word that must be understood is the little word as, an understanding of which eliminates forever all sense of duality. God is manifest as individual being. If God is manifest as individual being, there is not God and man. There is not God and you. Therefore, there cannot be a person going to God for something. During the years when I was devoting my time exclusively to the healing work, as patients came to me, I learned not to see them as human beings, nor to look to a God to patch them up. I saw that everyone who came to me was God appearing as individual being, and that truth revealed harmony. That truth revealed the divinity of their being and body, and that revelation was the foundation stone of the Infinite Way. There is only God manifesting its infinite spiritual nature as your being. I and my Father are one, as Jesus said, not two. In that oneness, all that God is, you are. When you understand as God appearing as individual you and me, you will understand why all that God is, you are. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I can. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. I am joint heir with Christ to all of the heavenly riches. I can of mine own self do nothing, but because of my oneness with the Father, all that God is, I am. Wherever I am, the Father within me is. Therefore, wherever I am, the Father within me is about his business. God appearing as individual being, God appearing as you, is a secret of the Infinite Way. It is a secret of spiritual healing. This you is not a reflection or a separate idea or something less than God, but God itself made manifest. God, the Father, appearing on earth as individual being. Oneness is the secret. After you've assimilated this truth by living with it, by practicing it, by looking out at every man, woman, and child, every animal, vegetable, and mineral in the world, and realizing this is not what it seems to be. This is God appearing as. You develop that healing consciousness which never looks at people and judges them by their humanhood, but which is immediately in contact with their spiritual consciousness. You train yourself to see people not as they look, but to see through their eyes, back of their eyes, realizing that there sits the Christ of God. As you do that, you learn to ignore appearances, and instead of trying to heal or reform someone or improve him, you're really bearing witness to his Christ identity. Second, and equal in importance to the word as, is the word is. If it is true that God manifests as individual being, then harmony already is the truth about every person. And so the great word in prayer and treatment is. You're never trying to heal anyone. You're never trying to reform or enrich anyone. You live always in the realization of is. Since God is your being, harmony is. Since all that the Father has is yours, you are now in the fullness and completeness of God. Since God is the activity of your being, harmony is the law of your being. By never dwelling in the past or future, you live in the consciousness of is. Even though you see a sick person, a drunken person, or a dying person, you ignore the appearance and declare is, because of as, is, must be. Do you see? If God is appearing as you, then harmony is the truth about you. The most powerful word in the vocabulary of prayer is the verb is. Harmony is. God is. Joy is. Peace is. Abundance is. Omnipresence is. In the presence of omnipresence, is there anything to be healed, changed, reformed, overcome, or destroyed? You look at every appearance, but you do not permit yourself to become disturbed by any of them. Your eyes may bear witness to somebody's illness, poverty, or sinfulness, but Spirit tells you, no, this is God manifest. This is the very incarnation of God. Therefore, harmony is true, regardless of what my eyes see or my ears hear. Spiritual healing demands a developed consciousness. It is a consciousness that is able to see through the appearance, an inner vision that assures you of this truth even when the senses testify to a thief or dying person. Nobody can be a successful spiritual healer except the person who has that inner assurance. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. It matters not what the outer senses may testify. Something within has to sing a song, and the song it must sing is, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. I, in the midst of you, am mighty." Words will not do that. It has to be an inner conviction, and that is only attained through practice, through realization, and finally through the grace of God, which comes to you in your inner self. When you can sit beside a very sick person with no trace of fear because something inside of you is singing, "This is my beloved Son. In the midst of you, I am mighty. I will never leave you nor forsake you." Then you're a spiritual healer. That takes development brought about by practice, until the day comes when this voice speaks to you from within. Otherwise, this consciousness is received through the grace of God as a gift. It is difficult to achieve this conviction, however, until certain other facets related to spiritual healings are clarified. One of the most important of these is the function of the mind. In the early days of metaphysical healing, it was taught that the body is subject to the mind. This was such a novel idea, so new and challenging, that modern man began the practice of using his mind to control his body. For a short time, he found that it worked, and sometimes it still works with beginners. The fallacy in this technique, however, is that it leaves out of consideration the fact that behind thought there must be a thinker, and that thinker is not a person. The thinker is God, the soul of man. The mind is an instrument of awareness. You can know the truth with the mind, but you do not create things with the mind. Even an inventor does not create with the mind. He becomes aware of certain natural laws which have always existed, and learns how to bring them together and utilize them. The right use of the mind as an instrument of awareness makes it not only a powerful instrument, but one that increases in its capacity the more it is used, continuously unfolding new potentialities. Once it is understood that the mind is an instrument, it must also be understood of what it is the instrument. Because to be an instrument, there must be something governing and controlling the instrument. Unfortunately, most people have never found the center within, which can effectively control the mind. In mental science, students who try to control the mind by willpower, or by changing their thoughts, usually discover that the mind cannot be controlled by man and often end up in a worse condition than when they started, making nervous wrecks of themselves. The mind is an instrument for something higher than itself. That something is your self, your true identity. And when it governs the mind and controls it, you will find yourself at peace, perfect peace, a peace that passeth understanding. You will have a correct picture and a good example of the proper use of the mind if you recall some of the photographs you may have seen of Thomas A. Edison. Almost always, Edison is pictured with his hand up to his ear in an attitude of intense listening. Those who worked with him in a laboratory have recounted story after story of how he would give them an experiment to work on, which they would carry out as far as they could, and then they would call upon him for assistance. Immediately, Edison's hand would go up to his ear, he would listen, and then give directions as to the next step. Let me point out the difference between attempting to use the mind as a creative faculty and using the mind as an instrument of awareness. If I were operating on the level of the mind or thought, I would close my eyes and affirm over and over, your body is well. Your body functions normally. Your body responds to this truth and that I'm knowing. And in all probability, there would be some healing and some benefit derived from such practice. As a matter of fact, in the early days of metaphysics, there were remarkable healings. Actually, however, it was never the full truth that the mind of one person could control the body either of himself or of another person. It was one of those one on the way to getting there places. It was a stopping place, a higher level than believing that the body in and of itself contains the issues of life. From the standpoint of spiritual healing and spiritual living, in which God is understood as the soul, the law, and the life unto all being, and in which the mind is an instrument and the body is the outer manifestation, the procedure is entirely different. If you're operating from that basis, when someone asks for help, you will close your eyes and you'll think no thoughts. You will take no thought for what he shall eat or what he shall drink or what his health shall be. You'll merely sit there, knowing that your mind is an avenue of receptivity. Receptive to what? Receptive to the still small voice that which call God, that which is the soul of man. You'll make no declarations, but you'll maintain a listening attitude, and then the still small voice will utter itself, and the earth will melt. In the silence, in which you have become almost a vacuum, a listening vacuum, always attentive, never sleepy, never tired, never lagging, but always awake, alert, waiting for the visitation of the Christ out of that silence, out of the infinity, which is God. Out of the depths of the soul comes either a voice, a feeling, a stirring, a release, or an assurance. Call it any name you wish, and the error is dissolved and disappears. It will make no difference whether the problem is physical, mental, moral, financial, or whether it is one of relationships, because it is not your wisdom that is undertaking the work. You're not drawing now on what you have learned in your years of life on earth. You're holding yourself completely receptive to that which created you in the beginning and which knows the destiny of every person. And when you let it voice your and when you let it voice itself, you will be back where you belong, which is under the jurisdiction of your heavenly Father, under the government of the He who knoweth your need before you do. He whose good pleasure it is to give you the kingdom. Let the mind be an instrument of awareness, and instead of trying to break your head against an apparently insoluble problem, worrying about what the next step should be, or what you are to do tomorrow or the next day, form the habit of listening with your mind, using it as an instrument of awareness. Let God fill your mind. Be a witness to the Spirit motivating, animating, and permeating both the mind and body. Be a witness to it. Make of the mind and of the body instruments of God. Through the mind, become aware of the truth of God, and that truth will do the work, not your mind and not your thoughts. It is not the activity of your mind that frees anybody. It is the activity of truth in your mind that frees him. You may have observed that in swimming, the more vigorously a person uses his body, the more quickly will he become exhausted. Whereas the one who is completely relaxed in the water, resting on the surface, using his arms and feet to glide through the water rather than for the purpose of sustaining his body on top of the water, is able to remain afloat for a long, long time. The water holds the body up, the arms, the legs, merely propelling the body through the water, and the more relaxed the swimmer is, the longer will his body stay afloat. The healing work is a beautiful work when it becomes as natural as floating on water or breathing. Otherwise, healing work can be harder, much harder than day labor. The spiritual healer anchored in the spiritual wisdom remains relaxed in God and lets the Spirit flow. He lets the truth flow, and then the truth sets him and his patient free. The truth will do that. He never can. That is the true sense of humility, a relaxing in the spirit. I can on mine own self do nothing. Even though I try, just let me be relaxed and let the truth carry the work. When you're swimming, let the water carry your body. And when you're giving a treatment, let the Spirit, let the truth carry that treatment. Do not try to manipulate truth with your mind. Truth is infinite, but the mind is finite. Do not try to manipulate infinite truth to fit into the pattern of your finite mind. The mind is an instrument given to you for your use, just as the same as your body. We're not of those who deny the existence of a body or would throw the body out of the window, nor are we of those who would blank out or shut off the mind. The body is given to you so that you can move around in your present sphere of life. The body with its organs and functions, one integrated whole, is an instrument for you to use. It is God's instrument to show forth His glory. Rightly speaking, the proper use of the body is to let God use the body, to let God govern and control the body. That leads to that relaxed state in which the government is on His shoulders. There's no way to aid digestion, assimilation, or elimination by taking thought. The mind was not given to you for that purpose. The mind is a vehicle through which you become aware of truth, and that truth will govern every organ and function of the body. Truth will strengthen your muscles. Truth will give you the capacity to know anything that you have need of knowing. Every word of spiritual truth assimilated in your consciousness becomes a part of your mind and of your body. You do not control your body. You do not control your mind, but the activity of truth in your consciousness, an activity which, of course, uses your mind, keeps your mind clear, active, clean, harmonious, and vital. And your mind, in its turn, manages, controls, and governs the body. The activity of truth in your consciousness acts as a catalytic agent, purifying both mind and body. There is a spiritual center in you, and in that spiritual center is stored up your entire spiritual heritage, immortality, eternality, life, love, home, and infinite abundance. This center is not within your body, and it's useless to look for it there. It is your consciousness, and that consciousness is not in your body. Your body is in your consciousness, which is infinite. That is why, after you have studied and practiced, you'll be able to close your eyes, be at peace, and find yourself in the body, out of the body, or whatever you would like to be. You will be able to draw out the infinite of your own consciousness, all that is necessary for your unfoldment from this day unto the end of the world and beyond it into infinity. Many people in metaphysics feel that the healing of physical ills through spiritual means is difficult because they do not understand the nature of the body. This misunderstanding stems from the incorrect concept of the word matter. In fact, ever since the days of the first teachings of metaphysics, its followers have been confused by this term. The majority of those using the term matter, usually in quite glib fashion, have no understanding whatsoever of the true meaning of it. They have been taught that matter is unreal, that it is an illusion. They have been taught that matter has no life, and inasmuch as matter constitutes the body, they have denied the reality and existence of the body in an attempt to overcome or get rid of it. How can matter be unreal when it cannot be destroyed? Science has revealed that matter is an indestructible substance. Matter can change form, but it cannot be destroyed. It can be reduced to molecules and then to atoms. And when it has been resolved into atoms, what's left? Energy. Matter has not been destroyed by reducing it to its essence. Matter has only changed form. There is no way to destroy matter because matter is indestructible. Actually, the substance of matter is mind. Matter is mind appearing. Mind made visible as matter. Water, for example, can change to steam or to ice, but in the process of change, it has not been destroyed. In fact, it weighs just as much in one form as in another. A glass tumbler can be reduced to splinters. It can be dissolved from human sight, but its component parts cannot be destroyed. In the laboratory, the technician can prove that it has existence and that that existence has weight. If matter is indestructible, how then, you may ask, did this belief that matter is an illusion come about? The earliest recorded revelation as to the illusory nature of that which we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell is attributed to Gautama, the Buddha. On the basis of his revelation, he and his disciples did miracle healing work. His later students, however, misunderstood the word Maya, or illusion, and they interpreted illusion as something external to their being. When metaphysics was first given to the world in the last century, it was taught that our senses testify erroneously. Unfortunately, instead of holding to that, Metaphysicians began to teach that everything existing in the external world is an illusion, including the body. But this world is not an illusion. It is the concept we entertain. It is the concept we entertain of it that is the illusion. Spiritual healing is based on the premise that sin, disease, and death have no externalized reality. They exist only as illusory beliefs or concepts, but matter is not unreal. The body is not unreal. The world is not unreal. This world is beautiful, immortal, and eternal. This world will never be dissolved, but our concepts of it will change. Just as our concepts of our bodies change. Every adult will have to admit that he outgrew his concept of an infant body and put on a child's body. He outgrew that and took the body of youth, and then later discarded his youthful body when he grew to the stature of maturity. Furthermore, as he progresses on the spiritual path, he'll entertain a more spiritual sense of body. But never will he have a more spiritual body than he has now. Probably more fun is poked at the metaphysics and mysticism because of their use of the words real, unreal, and reality, as well as unreality, than for any other reason. Metaphysicians are often ridiculed because some of them use such expressions as it is unreal or it is untrue. Two cars collide head on and scatter themselves and those in them all over the scenery, and the metaphysicians comes along and says, "Oh, it's unreal, it's untrue, it never happened." Can you blame the world for ridiculing such statements? The world does not understand the metaphysical meaning of the words untrue or unreal. And the sad part is that very often the metaphysician using these same words does not understand the meaning of them either. In the work of the infinite way, the words real or reality pertain only to that which is spiritual, eternal, immortal, and infinite. Only that which is of God is understood to be real, or recognized as reality. With this definition of reality in mind, it should be easy to grasp the statement that we cannot see, hear, touch, smell reality. The words unreal and unreality pertain to anything, whether to our sense harmonious or inharmonious, that is not permanent. It is at this point that the metaphysician usually makes his mistake. As a rule, when he sees a healthy person or what he calls a good or moral person or a normal, healthy, harmonious situation, he's likely to think of that person or situation as real. But when he sees the sick or sinning, he calls that unreal. Such an interpretation is invalid in the light of the philosophic meaning of these words. Reality pertains only to that which is spiritual, is of spirit, soul, God, and therefore must be spirituality understood. It requires the faculty of the soul to behold reality. Reality pertains only to that which is discerning through an inner awareness. Jesus referred to this as having eyes, see ye not, having ears, hear ye not. In other words, there is that which must be seen and heard with the soul faculties. When we speak of sin and disease as unreal, we do not mean that they are non-existent. We're not just fooling ourselves and using our imagination in saying that they are unreal or untrue. But if a person has that ingrained in him from infancy, that the material is the real and the material body the whole, then to him the disease is existent. When sin, disease, and death are called unreal, it is not a denial of the so-called existence of these things. It is the denial of their existence as a part of God or reality. Do you see the difference between these two statements? In the realm of the real, the kingdom of God, the discords of sense have no existence. That, however, does not change the fact that we suffer from them. The unreality of it does not lessen our pain or remove our lack or limitation, because to our sense of things we are suffering from them. The beginning of wisdom is the realization that these conditions need not exist. Freedom from them comes not from seeking relief from God, but through seeking God and rising to that dimension of life in which only God is. There is not freedom from discord. There is not freedom from sin, false appetites, or desires. There is not freedom from poverty. There is only freedom in God, freedom in spirit. In filling yourself with the Spirit, you'll find that spiritual law will operate in your experience in terms of all your needs. That is how the healing, even of the body, takes place. Not because God thinks in terms of a sick physical body, nor even a well physical body, but because as you rise above the concepts of the physical into the realization of spirit, your consciousness is transformed and shows forth harmony in language and a form that you can understand. Never use such statement as never use such statements as, "Oh, it is unreal," or "Oh, it's untrue," or "It never happened," unless you understand that what you're talking about is unreal and untrue and never happened in the spiritual kingdom. With that distinction in mind, you can accept the premise of the spiritual healing ministry that all sin, disease, lack, and limitation are unreal and that they are no part of reality. The Master saw the unreality of power, evil power, when in response to Pilates' threat, "Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee?" He answered, "Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above." Jesus recognized all the temporal power Pilate had, but he knew that in his own consciousness of reality, temporal power could not be exercised, nor could it operate. Again, when he was arrested, instead of resisting, he healed the soldier from whose ear had been cut off by Peter. And later on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He saw right through this human activity. He saw right through this human activity. He saw it as unreal, that is, as not a part of the eternal, the immortal, and the forever lasting. It was his spiritual discernment which enabled him to come forth from the tomb. To his illumined spiritual consciousness, there was no power in the crucifixion. This same illumined spiritual consciousness, this Christ consciousness, is here and now. It is this consciousness which enabled the spiritual healer of today to heal the sick and the sinning. It is this conviction that all forms of evil are unreal, because they have no power to perpetuate themselves, no power to maintain or sustain themselves in the face of spiritual truth. Honor God in the realization that the spiritual kingdom is intact, and that whatever comes to your attention in the form of sin, disease, death, lack, or limitation is no part of reality, no part of the kingdom of God, and therefore has no witness, cannot stand, and has no substance or law to maintain it. Let us assume that you have caught at least a glimpse of the underlying premise of spiritual healing, which is that God appears as you, and that sin, disease, and death are unreal because they are no part of God, and have no existence in consciousness elevated to the spiritual awareness. Now, let us go on to consider certain other terms frequently used in the healing ministry. As a rule, disease is spoken of not as disease, but as a claim. For example, consumption, cancer, or paralysis is referred to as a claim, a belief, or an appearance. You may ask as you read this, does changing the name really do anything? Yes, it does. Because the healing work is an activity of consciousness, and unless these subtle phases of the healing ministry are clear to you, there is no activity of truth in your consciousness to bring about healing. Let me illustrate. If you were traveling on the desert and saw, as it often is the case, that the road ahead of you was covered with water, and if that were your first experience in the desert, you would automatically stop your car because obviously you could not drive through the sea of water. Your first thought would probably be, what shall I do? How will I get through this water? How can water be removed from the road? You look around and do not see any help. Then you look back again at the road, and if you look long enough, intently enough, you awaken to the fact that there is no water there. What you have been seeing is a mirage, an illusion. You may smile and start your car and go on forward. As long as you were seeing the water on the road, you'd sit there helplessly, waiting for the water to be removed. But the moment that you understood it to be a mirage, an illusion, the water disappeared and you were free to go forward. That is exactly the process in spiritual healing work. As long as you're dealing with cancer, consumption, a tumor, paralysis, a cold, or influenza, you are at an impasse. What can you do about it? How can you get rid of it? What power have you to remove it? Or is there a God who can remove it? Too many prayers have been sent up to God to remove or change things or conditions so that we know that does not work. Then what can you do about it? As long as it remains a disease in your consciousness, there's nothing you can do about it. But when, however, through illumined consciousness, you come to see that it does not exist as disease, but that it exists only as a mirage or illusion, then you have taken the first step in healing. Actually, healing is not difficult, regardless of the name or structure of the disease. If disease and sin become unreal in your consciousness. Strangely enough, one type of disease can become unreal in a person's consciousness, and he still might continue to have difficulty seeing the unreality of another form of disease. One of my early experiences in spiritual healing illustrates this point. At that time, I was asked for help in a case of tuberculosis in which the patient, a young woman, was already being cared for in the death shack, a place provided for those who were expected to pass within the next few days, and where they were given good care, but were completely isolated from other patients. From the beginning, it is required constant alertness. It took 13 weeks of continuous work, hours and hours a day, hours and hours a day before the doctors reported any significant improvement. And it was 13 months before she left the sanatorium, completely restored in health. To this day, she writes to me every Easter, Christmas, and Thanksgiving, always with the same story, that the only reason she ever goes to bed is to sleep. There is no sickness, and has not been found from that time to this. The work that I did with her in that long period of time remained so indelibly impressed on me that every case of tuberculosis that has come to me in the years that have followed has been healed with the exception of one. The point I'm trying to bring out through this experience is that healings take place not through the intervention of some God, but through arriving at some state of consciousness in which sin, disease, and death have no reality, a consciousness which no longer battles these forms of discord and no longer tries to get rid of them. Our attitude toward them is the same as our attitude toward the water on the desert after we've discovered that it is not water but an illusion or mirage. As long as disease is a reality to you, as long as you believe that fevers must run their course, or that they must be brought down, or that tumors must be reduced, or as long as you believe that the disease must follow some kind of physical pattern, you are not in spiritual healing, even though to some extent the Spirit may have brought. As long as disease is reality to you, as long as you believe that fevers must run their course, or that they must be brought down, or that tumors must be reduced, or as long as you believe that the disease must follow some kind of physical pattern, you are not in spiritual healing, even though to some extent the Spirit may have been brought into the picture. Complete, total spiritual healing is the non-recognition of reality of the condition. It is a state of your consciousness, or mind, or practitioner's consciousness, in which God is so real that the works of God, the Word of God, the universe of God, and the man of God are so real that it is fantastic to believe that such a thing as disease of any kind can exist in God's universe. The successful healing ministry is based, first of all, on the reality of God and the reality of God's creation, whether appearing as a man, body, or universe. And in that second place, on the realization that of the unreal nature of what is presenting itself to us as a sick or sinning person, as disease, or as an undesirable habit. Let us understand the correct meaning of the term real and unreal, their meaning in spiritual sense. In other words, realize that whatever you behold through the physical senses is but a mirage which can be likened to the water on the desert. When you're able to do this, you will immediately translate illness into health. In fact, when you begin to discern spirituality, when you begin to discern spiritually, you will see something in everything around you. In flowers, clouds, stars, sunsets, sunrises, something greater than the human mind can grasp. Behind every externalized form, there's always more than the human mind or eye can comprehend. When you see with spiritual vision, you behold the man God made in his image and likeness. And it is this ability to discern reality which brings out healing.